Starting. This hangout is now live.
Nice.
Cool.
What's up, Cameron?
What's up, Trevor? It has been a minute. It's very good to see your face again.
You too, man. It's a pleasure. Thanks for doing this. I've been wanting to talk to you again for a bit, and I know it's been hard to kind of align our schedules.
Yeah, definitely. We're both super super busy, but it's really good to see your face again and have this keep going and keep talking about, because we were for those who haven't seen, or if you're first time seeing Trevor, he grew up born and raised as a Mormon, and I grew up born and raised as a Jehovah's Witness, and we had a chat about a year ago on the channel, and we thought it'd be really cool to talk today about Jehovah's Witness Mormon and Mormon origins on the channel, which is super super interesting.
Last time was more kind of, I think, I honestly haven't listened to it since we probably did it, to be honest with you, but I remember us talking a lot about our exits out of religion. I think that was primarily what we discussed, and some of the similarities between the two, religions a little bit, but we didn't dive into. I mean, the fun thing about this conversation is over the last couple of years, I think we both just learned so much more about not just our religion, but world religion in general, and really when you focus on knowledge and really studying things out, beautiful things like come out of the woodwork, right? And real interesting stuff. And so, when we were talking the other day, it was like I wanted to dive into so much, but I was like, we got to save something for our podcast, because I think you and I talked on the phone for like an hour nonstop.
Oh, easily. This is like, where do you begin when you both come from equally crazy places?
Right.
So yeah, I want you to get started, because I think it's really important that the Mormon and JW community, ex-JW and ex-Mormon community, get closer and closer. And it was crazy when we were just talking about our hour-long conversation, how similar but yet how different they were, but they both equally come from crazy origins with Joseph Smith, and they got Charles Taze Russell.
And the word crazy is so, I lack adjectives really to describe the history of what we're involved in, because crazy is probably a good word, because it's, it's the good, the bad, the ugly, the super interesting, the mystical, the magical, the occult. I mean, you name it, right? And all of it has converged to create a certain belief pattern, a certain structure with society as well, that we were just born into, and the majority of people are born into, everybody's born into a pattern, right? A psychological pattern. And so being aware of that and being able to step outside of it and see that everybody has different psychological patterns, all based on their geographical region, right? Man, it's just, crazy is absolutely an understatement, right? When talking about this kind of stuff. So I'm really excited. And I'm actually really excited to, and I love how we're cutting to the chase here. I was expecting a little, like banter, like pre, discussion banter, but let's just screw that, right? Let's get into it. People don't want to hear that stuff. Let's cut to the chase. Right?
Well, no, I think you're right. We should actually, besides saying born and raised into Mormonism, I think people would be interested to know how far up in the ranks you went. That seems to, because we both come from like hierarchical backgrounds where you're judged on your status and how much life you've devoted to the church and given away. Just a briefing on that for you would be really dope. And let's jump into it. So you're absolutely
perfect.
Right.
Yeah. I'm not assuming that people saw the first one. So, and I would love your intro as well. I know this is coming from your channel, but and most people know you and kind of what you've come from. I'd love to share this as well. So maybe you could talk a little bit about yourself. But so yeah, my name is Trevor Haugen. I was born and raised in Salt Lake City, Utah, and right at the Mormon heartbeat, and I had a great upbringing. I didn't experience any any abuse within the church. So really, obviously there's things happening, but typically in my experience, it's kind of not so much intentional from the people that are giving you these beliefs, because they honestly, I mean, to their best knowledge, this is the absolute truth, and this is the you know, the totality of knowledge, right, and all of that. And so, you know, you can't really blame, you know, the people that are involved in the whole situation, but I actually had a great upbringing, amazing family, and just fun upbringing until it got to my mission. I always kind of like knew that the mission was coming, almost like, you know, you're gonna die one day, right? Like, you know, that's gonna happen, but you don't like to think about it very often. I'm not comparing serving a mission to death. Wow. But, you know, it's just one of those things that, like, you knew you had to do. Otherwise, you know, I mean, for me, it wasn't even a question. I would have completely lost my entire social structure, like, by choosing not to serve a mission. But I also grew up, you know, with the idea of the Holy Ghost being a very strong part of my upbringing. And I did feel the Holy Ghost. I mean, I can't deny that feeling of love and, you know, and hope, that one feels, right? But you know, it was defined for me as a certain thing, you know what I mean? That was telling me a certain thing, you know? And so I had felt these feelings, and I had associated them with, you know, coincidentally, the only religion that I was really aware of or had looked into. You know, right. I didn't spend much time reading like sacred texts from other religions, or, you know, I knew that, like, the Pope was the devil, basically. Like, the Catholic Church was like the whore of the earth, apparently.
I actually didn't know that the Mormon Church demonizes Catholicism, just like Jehovah's Witnesses. They're like Satan.
Well, you know, and it comes from well, and we'll get into origins, but if you look at the Freemasons, for the Masons, the Pope is like the #1 enemy. So, from like the Freemason perspective, and from the Catholic Church perspective, if you're a Mason, you could be excommunicated. So anyway, it doesn't play well with Christianity, but we'll get to that. But anyway, so I served a mission, though. I mean, it was tough to leave, you know, my family and everything, and I didn't really feel like it was forced. I felt like I had no decision in the matter, so to speak, but that doesn't mean force, because I actually wanted to, because I had this feeling, you know, that I like this, there was this revolutionary in me, you know, and we're taught in seminary too. And I went through seminary and institute and graduated, but, you know, you're taught that you are, you know, part of the noble and great ones. Right. And so, you know, I've been like destined for this, like for all eternity or something, however long the preexistence was, I was like prepping for this, you know? And so there's this feeling of like pride and that you're just doing the right thing, you know? And so I got called to serve a mission. I went to Bolivia for 2 years, learned Spanish. It really was, for the most part, an amazing experience. Learned a lot of social skills, learned a lot more about the church, but not at the same time. You know, you're taught to adhere to certain manuals that are, you know, church approved. You can't talk to family. Well, you couldn't until about a week ago. The church changed its policy. Now the missionaries can call home and FaceTime, apparently.
Now that was interesting that they pretty much
every
isolate
week.
You when you're on missionary work. Do you know the reason?
Well, yeah, the isolation is absolutely a thing. I think I talked home like 3 or 4 times. And letters were very tough to get into. I mean, you know, I served in 2000, in the year 2000 to 2002. So, man, we're going on 20 years. And technology was not the same. There weren't cell phones or texting or even emails, you know, until the very end of my mission that started popping up. You know, and there was like internet cafes and stuff. And it was like, what the? Because when I left, you know, like the late 90s, you know, the internet was still kind of picking up. And so there was still very much a control over the knowledge, like the knowledge control, the information control was a lot more powerful. Now with the internet and communication the way it is, it kind of blows my mind that some people are still limiting themselves to certain information. But yeah, I mean, we couldn't listen to any music outside of church approved music. So for 2 years, this guy listened to Mormon Tabernacle Choir, or, you know, like maybe like new age versions of like popular hymns. That was really as crazy as it got. And I felt like when we would go down into the city and I'd walk into stores and I'd hear like Blink 182 and I would be like I would just try to revel in it for just a sec, like, Elder, hold on, give me a second. But then like after I felt bad, like that was a sin. Yeah.
That is pretty crazy. I can align with that, because growing up, you know, I think the most acceptable worldly, because we called anything that wasn't a Jehovah's Witness worldly, the most acceptable music that I could listen to besides like classical music was like Coldplay, you know, and Coldplay was, they have really good music, but that was the only thing that was acceptable in God's eyes. And when I was a teenager and I heard like Rage Against the Machine on the air, I was like, what is this? This is amazing.
Well, I'm glad to hear that Coldplay is good in God's eyes. They're good in my book.
He's so good in God's eyes. That was one of the
I love how you have this, you know, it's so relevant that you have a coffee mug during this conversation that's labeled coffee. You know, I should actually have that in my hands right now. But yeah, now I'm sticking to the word of wisdom. I've got agua. Cameron, come on, take care of yourself.
Just the water. Black coffee is life. It is life.
Is it life?
Yes. Can't survive a day without it.
See, I didn't grow up with coffee. This is the funny thing, you know? So like the taste of alcohol, like beer, especially, and coffee, like it's just not, I mean, and again, I'm only, you know, a few years out of this kind of structure. And so
how many years out are you currently? Like mentally out, physically out? You're mentally up on 4 or 5?
No. This all happened. Well, yeah,
less than that.
I would say 3 or 4.
3 or 4. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, it was late 2015, early 16, and then really heavy summer of 2016. That's when, like, not only was it the only term that I could really think of to give it would be an awakening, really, because, like, you know, I had doubts and I had, you know, these questions and things, you know, but like the Holy Ghost basically, for me anyway, would just completely dispel whatever doubt that I had ever had, because I had felt certain things and I can't, you know what I mean? Like, I can't deny that. So why even, you know, and like knowledge a lot of the times like is like anti-Mormon or anti-Christian even. And you'd feel dirty almost reading it. You know what I mean? Because what I think what that feeling is it's a cognitive dissonance, I think, is what it is. And your authentic self, or your real, like, curious self about wanting knowledge, is coming into conflict with everything that you've known to be true and felt to be true. And so there's this term that they use for this period of time that you go through. And I absolutely went through it. I'll get back to kind of my 20s and 30s in the church in a second, but there's kind of like this dark night of the soul that happened, where I had actually got to the point where I lost every belief that I'd ever had. You talk about it a lot when you talk about starting from zero. Like, are you ready to start from zero? And people think that zero is a dark place, but what they don't realize is there's a little light, a little spark at the end of that dark tunnel.
Yeah, it's a positive thing. It's, you know, starting over from zero is another chance to make things the way you want it. But when you're there, it's also a very scary thing.
It's scary. It feels, you know, like, I mean, you're definitely, that to me is faith. That to me would be faith, because I've never in the church really felt faith because everyone else was doing it. You know what I mean? I kind of was always like relying on other people, but this was for the first time I was taking a step into the unknown, trusting myself and what I was feeling. And you know what I mean? For the first time. And just like in Indiana Jones in The Last Crusade, that little bridge, it was there for me. Thank God. Anyway, but I had a question for you, Cameron. So did you serve a mission, sure, or how does that work in the J-dubs? Because I know, and sorry, I don't mean to say J-dubs, in the Jehovah's Witness, I don't know how respectable or respectful or politically correct I should be about the name of Jehovah's Witness.
We're pretty relaxed on the channel now. We've grown a lot.
It's
primarily aimed at ex-J-dubs, ex-Jehovah's Witnesses, whatever we want to call them. J-dubs.
Because they have you guys have a huge missionary culture, right? A huge missionary culture.
Huge, yeah, absolutely huge. So, like, I think the major difference is that we start sending, and you correct me if I'm wrong, we start sending out kids into the door-to-door ministry as early as we can. So I think that's,
so when you say as early, like what age is typical?
I mean, my earliest memories of being a child are being pushed around in a stroller at maybe 4 years old, with my mom going door to door with a small group of Jehovah's Witnesses preaching the good word. So that's like my earliest memories ever, is recruiting people.
Whoa.
Yeah. So really insane.
So when you're, I mean, prepubescent adolescent, you're talking to your friends about this, so they really take to heart the whole every member a missionary. It's funny because, you know, in the LDS church, you know, they have that saying, every member a missionary, but really nobody really, I mean, unless you're called to it, or you feel guilty because, like, you know, someone that's not a member and you like slip a name to a missionary or something, but like, members are not missionaries like Jehovah's Witnesses members are missionaries. Like you guys have us beat for sure. but do you guys have like a time where you're completely isolated and sent to a foreign place to preach the word? Does that happen in the church? Or
yes, absolutely. So we start preaching the good news of Jesus and his kingdom and the new system from an early age, and they start the whole indoctrination from as soon as they can of cutting off people who are bad associations. So this isolation begins. As you get older, they want you to get baptized as soon as possible. So kids that are even 5 or 6 or a little around that 5 to 10 who have no life experience at all are being encouraged and coerced into being baptized, which gives Watchtower full control over the child's life. And that is more powerful than the parents' decision making, which breaks a bunch of civil liberties right there. But as you get older, you're encouraged to go to something called Bethel, which is the world headquarters in New York, upstate New York, and serve. Or you can do missionary work, or like in a foreign land. There's also where the need is great all over the United States. So you could be in Wisconsin helping out a congregation there, or you could be in France, or Brazil or Mexico, or somewhere in Europe. And of course, this is all self-funded, so you have to pay if you do the missionary work, unless you go to a school. They call it a fancy school, and they have so many different branches. I can literally go on and on. They have branches for couples, missionary couples, those who are in Bethel, single people are better, but the whole thing, it's nonstop. So the indoctrination just goes deep, and they do isolate you a lot.
And I wanted to ask you, are Jehovah's Witnesses, are they like getting paid from umbrella companies? Because I swear the umbrellas are used quite extensively in the missionary work for Jehovah's Witnesses. They always have umbrellas. Is that a thing? I know in Bolivia they would walk around with umbrellas all the time.
Interesting. Are they paid by umbrella companies? Wait, paid by umbrella companies, as in, that's a new concept for me.
I'm totally kidding. No, I'm just saying it's interesting because they're always with these umbrellas, and it was like there's I remember when I was a missionary, we walk around like young businessmen,
right?
And so like and I'm sure, I mean, you guys dress up as well. Mm-hmm. But the one thing that always distinguished like the Jehovah's Witness missionaries from from us is you guys always had umbrellas and we didn't have umbrellas. And thinking back, I'm like, that would have been actually pretty smart because of how much sun, you know, like they're probably just protecting themselves because they're literally walking around all day. And that's what we were doing too, but we were just not as smart about it. So, you know, so J-Dubs 1, Mormon 0 on that.
Yeah, it sounds like it was just, it might have been like a cultural thing in that area. It was just hot, so they had an umbrella. But I know the big differentiator for the States is wearing a full suit, and the guy, it's usually just two dudes on a bike with just a white shirt and some kind of tie. Like a,
oh, and
like
so the Jehovah's Witnesses do like a full suit.
Full suit, and culturally, depending on where you're at, you know, it could be a lighter suit. You know, you're allowed to take off your jacket and stuff, but usually it's a full suit.
Wow. Yeah, as crazy as they get like in the super hot places, they'll do, yeah, you could just wear a white shirt with, you know, short sleeve and a tie and pants. But typically never shorts. But anyway, yeah. But anyway, so that was, I mean, that was the mission. So did you go to Bethel then? And did you do all of that stuff?
I did go to Bethel. It was crazy. So near my older teenage years, I ended up getting baptized in San Francisco at the Cow Palace in front of 10,000 Jehovah's Witnesses. And I started thinking, like, I started questioning things at the same time. I was like, you know what? Because internally, there was some resiliency internally going on, going, hey, I really actually would like to have a girlfriend and go to college or you know, get a job and do all these things and pursue a career. Because I already knew at that point what my passion was, and I wanted to go after that. But there's this internal struggle, and your parents are telling you, why don't you put God's things first, because then you'll be blessed forever and in the next life, and you can always pursue that later on, right?
Right.
But going to Bethel, I started making friends with, they have missionaries, pioneers. Those are people who go out door to door full time.
Mm-hmm.
So during the month, they're supposed to have a certain amount of hours, and they have like a fact sheet that everyone checks. And they turn it into their group of elders, so that way they know how many hours that they're giving. It's very highly controlled. And then if you don't do a certain amount of hours per month, then someone has a conversation with you and says, "Hey, are you doing okay? Like, what's going on? Is there anything we can help you out with?" But yeah, I started doing Bethel trips, and I went into the RBC. I think it's now called the LDC, where you build kingdom halls or build churches, build temples. I guess the terminology that people might be familiar with who aren't J-Dubs. Started doing that. Started becoming exclusive friends with other missionaries and pioneers, and then I got into Bethel, started visiting. But at the same time, my internal started going off. It's like something is good, but something is wrong here. So I did go to Bethel, and I was about ready to apply to Bethel. But that's also when I started to slowly kind of wake up, and things started to slowly kind of change. So fortunately, I didn't serve, unfortunately and fortunately, because who knows how I could have been still brainwashed if I had been there. But yeah, I was a regular auxiliary pioneer, and I was just about ready to become a pioneer, a full-time pioneer. Giving parts and all that stuff, traveling.
Hold on, what is that? What is that? A full-time pioneer? That's you just trek around your whole life. I mean, how do you take care of yourself?
Well, most of them live at home. You know, full-time pioneers, they give a certain amount of hours. It used to be an insane amount of hours, like 100 hours a month. You would go out, knocking, getting Bible studies, recruiting people. Like their recruitment work was strong, and you would live at home. You know, live at home, and some people would work part-time. Some people wouldn't. Most of them did work part-time to help parents out with bills, because you're not allowed to go to college, so everyone's educationally not very smart, as far as like book smart and degrees and everything. But you were allowed to go to like a 2-year trade school, usually in construction or welding or like electricity or not electricity, but electrician stuff, so that way you can help build more kingdom halls. And they can use you for free as free labor.
Right. Now is the tithing also a mandatory thing in the Jehovah's Witness?
It wasn't when I was going pushed as hard, but now when I left, my spiritual little brother, he's my little brother, he came out as gay probably a couple years after I had left. He was reporting to me every once in a while when he came out. He's like, "Oh my God, Cameron, I'm gay. I don't know what to do." he was reporting to me that, yeah, they're having monthly conversations now. Can everyone commit to X amount of dollars per month?
Wow.
So it's changing, and it has changed a lot. And I've only been mentally gone for about 2 years, which is crazy.
Okay, so that's a difference then, because see that, you know, with the LDS Church, tithing is mandatory. I mean,
it's like 10%, isn't it? That's
yeah, it's 10%. Yeah, I mean, if you want to participate in the temple, which, I mean, that's where all of like the ordinances. I mean, that's where you receive ordinances to salvation.
Right.
And so you want to go to the temple, you know. So, and if you want to go to the temple, I mean, that's tied to tithing. So, you know, you have an interview with your bishop, and, you know, and they make sure that you're paying a full tithe, you know. So interesting. I always thought that was just how it was in every church. And then, like, I actually started going to other churches and saw that it's really like mostly donations. And I was like, oh, interesting.
No, yeah, that now they're going to donation base, and people, I don't know if they do this in the LDS church, but you can like donate land, property. They'll take debit and credit cards, whatever you can give. And now they're giving public live videos to give people to give more.
Wow. That is insane, man. Isn't it crazy seeing the religions change so quickly as of recent? I wonder what that has to do with, you know, because like there's been a couple giant changes with the LDS Church, and I feel like there are more and more changes going on in religions like ours that we come from. The kind of, I don't know, the older that we get, I feel like it was pretty like I don't know. I don't know the best way to put that, but yeah, it was. It seemed very consistent from the 80s, 90s, even into the early 2000s, and now just over the past 5 years, I mean, they've cut church from 3 hours down to 2 hours.
Yeah, that's massive. Yeah,
that's a huge change, and people are like, you know, wow, that's really good, you know, and they're excited about it. I mean, obviously, who wants to go to 3 hours when you can go to 2 hours, right?
I think anyone's gonna argue with that.
Yeah, it's almost like, you know, if you like 2 hours, how about 0 hours? It's even better. No, but the church is going to always look back at that as like a giant change. I mean, imagine a time when they used to go for, you know, 3 hours. You know, that's 33% less church. It's a big deal. And now they changed it so you can't say Mormon anymore within the church. Really, you have to. You know, the members are known as, you know, members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. The church is always referred to as the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. Even LDS, I think, is a little, you know, I don't know, not encouraged. But Mormon is huge, which is crazy because it was so part of our culture. I mean, the church owned Mormon.org. You know, they did a giant series of, you know, I am a Mormon. And now to not be able to say I'm a Mormon is
so weird.
It's so these are really big changes. And then they just made this change last week of these missionaries being able to call home every single week.
That's crazy. Yeah. Keep the ties. It's changing. Like either, I mean, how do you explain that from a church or religious perspective? Is the man making the change, or did God change his mind? Because God's perfect. He's supposedly not supposed to change his mind.
Yeah, he doesn't change his mind unless all the shareholders rise up against him.
Exactly, or some laws are changed, or people get sued. I think honestly, the reason why J-Dubs are getting people to ask for more money now is because they have been sued recently a lot in the last 10 plus years, and we're starting to win those cases.
Yeah, and so I don't know. You know, I mean, the internet is a huge, I think, precursor to a lot of these changes, because now with you know, the internet, with social media, now you've got organizations that can communicate and gather so much easier, so much quicker in order to make these changes happen. Whereas before it would have taken, you know, a lot of real grassroots efforts to put together petitions and, you know what I mean, traveling about and stuff. And so I think that has to do with it. But man, you know, I also think that, you know, we have prophets, seers and revelators, Cameron. And then, you know, and then we have the 12 apostles, 70, like a hierarchy.
Right.
But, you know, most of this is the main decisions come from the prophet and the 12 apostles. Now, I don't know exactly how the decision-making process works at those like upper echelons, but I think it's very, very much prophet and prophet-oriented. But also some of the elder members of the 12 also have a huge influence. And I mean, the members right now, they're absolutely loving, you know, President Nelson, the current prophet. It's like, well, no wonder. He's like the Oprah of prophets. He's like, you want 2-hour church? You got 2-hour church. You want to talk to your missionaries every week? Talk to your missionaries every week. Yeah. And so it's real interesting. And he's like in his mid-90s, this guy.
Wow.
So
he's still picking.
And he's still making, and he's making these decisions right now, or the senior members are getting up there as well, you know? And so it's really kind of, I don't know, I don't want to say comical, but it's super interesting.
Yeah, how people are demanding things and the church is changing their stance, which is interesting because that actually leads into what we were going to talk about originally, is the origins and how similar they are, how much they've changed for both J-dubs and Mormons over time. Yeah.
Okay, so maybe let's start with the J-dubs. Tell me a little bit about. Okay, so like, how are the Jehovah's Witnesses different from like Catholics? Because I think, you know, talking from a Catholic Christian perspective, you can kind of, you know, center a conversation. So, what are the major differences? And I mean, is it evangelical Christianity? Where does it come from geographically? All that kind of stuff.
Right. So for some reason, all this stuff comes from America. J-dubs, Mormons, all the good Scientology, all the good cults come from America. But it was Charles Taze Russell was the guy who started it, and he had owned a bunch of shops, so a bunch of like retail shops, and we had a lot of heavy contact with Seventh-day Adventists. There's definitely a lot of hints of paganism in his old literature. Actually, I happen to have a really old book here it was actually written by Charles Taze Russell. This is literally, if I look here, 1904 is when this was written. I haven't done a video on this, but he was heavy into like pyramidology.
Whoa!
That was part of their literature. There was huge.
Hold on. What is this book? Who is it from, and how's it connected to the church? Sorry.
Yeah, so it's called The Millennial Dawn, The Divine Plan of the Ages. It's from 1904. This is actually from my old congregation that I went to before I left. This is in their library, and I borrowed it to read it, and I never read it, but I kept it. And this is written by Charles Taze Russell, the founder of Jehovah's Witnesses.
Jeez.
Copyright 1886, but the 1904 edition. So this is actually older.
Wow. You know, this is so interesting. This is so interesting. Okay, this is crazy. I didn't know there would be this much of like a connection, but I guess it makes sense.
Yeah.
Well, okay, so you see where it's so interesting because it all comes from a philosophical mindset that was emanating from like the 17th century from Europe, and it's basically this creative mix of, you know, the Kabbalah, which is stemmed out of Judaism. It's like we can go into all these in detail, but it's really a creative mix of the Kabbalah, alchemy, and Hermeticism. from Hermes Trismegistus.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's a creative mix of all of those. And they came together and then crossed into England. And that's where a lot of, that's the creation of Masonry we see in the 17th century. And a lot of that bled into early colonial Protestant communities in America. And so you see a lot of this. So you see a lot of the similarities there. Those images that you were just showing, I mean, that's absolutely, it's from this magical mindset, the mystical, Kabbalion and Hermeticism and the Kabbalah. And it's so crazy because, a lot of people don't know, I don't know about the Jehovah's Witnesses, but I don't know how many people have actually read that book or like really looked into the origins of where those diagrams come from and where he's getting that stuff. Like the all-seeing eye.
Yeah, there's some crazy stuff in here. It just screams, number one, because Jehovah's Witnesses is the main thing they're afraid of. I don't know about Mormons, they're afraid of paganism. So anything,
yes,
yeah, super afraid of anything that's a belief in
magic, like black magic, like tarot cards.
Were you allowed to watch Harry Potter growing up?
We were. We saw it as fiction. It was fun. Yeah.
Oh, you're just like, oh, this is obviously not real, so we can watch. That's the
that's
way of approaching it. Wow,
you guys were not allowed to watch Harry Potter?
Not really. And if you did, you were kind of looked at the congregation as, oh, that person's not. They're not really.
Dude, we would even watch. My parents put on The Dark Crystal for me, which I'm so grateful they did. Like The Labyrinth, like Jim Henson. See, I grew up in the early 80s.
Mm-hmm.
And so, but yeah, and so like I was definitely like brought up with that kind of, never-ending story.
Good sire.
Well, yeah, but like this idea of fantasy and everything, because Joseph Smith had a tinge of it, and the thing is that he didn't actually really start getting into it and talking about this kind of stuff until the 1840s, and he was assassinated in 1844. And so in my opinion, I feel like Joseph Smith was really just getting started in some regards. And there's a lot in his later teachings that's ultra creative that you can't find in the Book of Mormon, which they say the Book of Mormon contains the entire, like the fullness of the gospel. However, the actual like temple ordinances are not contained in the Book of Mormon. So there's a little disconnect there. Mm-hmm. But see, this is something that he came up with later. And I mean, geez, talking about Joseph Smith, I mean, we're skipping to the end of his life, but this guy, I have to say, I really actually respect in a lot of ways. He was absolutely brilliant for his time. I see him actually as a Gnostic prophet because he had such an open mind that he studied topics that really helped him mold the church to what it is today. He wouldn't have been able to do it if he was not a Gnostic prophet, because he started thinking differently than just the evangelical Christians, in the sense that he had a tutor that was teaching him German and Hebrew in the early 1840s, Alexander Nabar. And Alexander Nabar has an interesting story too. He was the very first Jew to be baptized in the LDS Church, and they were really good friends. And so not only was he Joseph Smith's tutor, but they were seen a lot of the time just hanging out and like walking around and talking together. And Alexander Nabar understood the Kabbalah. And it was very likely that he actually had the Zohar, which is the Kabbalah in written form. And so when you look into this stuff, so like, why is it important, right? Why is it even interesting? Well, because the main, like the core, most sacred beliefs, and I'm not going to get into them because I don't want to offend anybody, but I will just say that, like, when you go to the Mormon temple, okay, and you go through the ordinances and you do the thing, you think that it's original to the church. But when you start looking at your origins of, you know, like, okay, let's look at the leader. Let's look at the creator of this religion. Let's look at the primary leader, and let's examine his mind, what he was exposed to, what kind of books he was reading, right? What were the teachings in his life? That's where you can really, really dive deep into your origins, because you realize that your mental pattern, your psychological, you know, upbringing is tied to that individual's mind. And so when you dive into those origins, all of the esoteric, like the symbolism behind everything, starts coming to life. See, my whole life I would go to the temple and I would see, like, you know, I would see a lot of symbols. Like, I'm not going to get into all of them, but I mean, they're on and inside every single LDS temple.
Like, name 2 or 3 of them that stand out that are really prominent. I'm curious.
I would say cosmology is all over the temple, so that's a big one.
Okay.
And then I would probably say the the universe is mind, like as above, so below is seen. Polarity is seen a lot. You see pine cones in the Joseph Smith Memorial Building, which the pine cone is at the top of the Pope's staff. Which I don't know if you're familiar with the Fibonacci.
I'm not with that one. No.
Okay, well, there's a pattern in the pine cone. There's a pattern in the pine cone that's called the Fibonacci pattern. I don't want to go rabbit hole too much into this, but basically it's the same pattern that you see when you look at a galaxy. Okay. So it's the cosmos. So it's the macro and the micro.
Oh, I've heard of this. Isn't that the cosmos that where God is supposed to live, and that contains the planets that the Mormons are supposed to take over?
Well,
or is that a different one?
You're thinking of something different. You're thinking of Kolob. Kolob is, that's a different thing. That's no, cosmos is, that's more of an astrophysical term. It's astrophysics, and it's basically combining, you know, astrology with physics, and saying that as infinite as it goes outward, it goes inward. And there's certain patterns like the Fibonacci that you can see in nature that go infinite, and that go infinite within us. And those same patterns are without us as well. So you could see, you know, in a pine cone, the same thing that you can see in a galaxy. It's the same exact pattern. And so I think, you know, when you see pine cones, this is one example, right? You see pine cones in religion, it's actually pointing to that. It's that principle that comes from Hermetics. It's actually the number one principle. It's the universe is mind, and as above, so below. Mm-hmm. As micro, you know, so macro, you know. And so those are a couple examples, but then there's the ceremony that happens, and, you know, and there's certain handshakes and certain verbal things that are said. And when you start looking into Masonry, you see that there's not just a few things that are copied here, but I mean, literally entire ceremonies. We're talking about hundreds of similarities there. And you can read about this, and you can study, and you can actually look into the esoteric, you know, nature of these things. And when I say esoteric, I mean more like the hidden inner meaning, you know, behind the thing. When most people look at scripture, when they look at the Bible, for example, they're looking at exoteric stories, right, or parables that are pointing to a more esoteric truth. But the thing is most people don't dive into ever the esoteric truth, or even know it exists, and they forget what they even forgot, and they start believing in the fairy tales themselves as literal truth.
Yeah. Yep.
And so what I'm saying is Joseph Smith knew all of this, and it's not a theory. It's actually very well known. It's just not talked about very much. So Joseph Smith Sr. was practiced Masonry. I'm not sure if he was a master Mason, but he was a Freemason. His brother Hiram, he grew up with, his best friend and really close in the church, he was also a Freemason. And so their family was a big influence in being one of the first families to really push to have a Masonic lodge in Nauvoo, Illinois in the early 1840s. And so as soon as they got it in 1842, they did this big, like, opening, grand opening of the lodge.
Mm-hmm.
And the very next day, Joseph Smith went through all of the orders and became a master mason, 33rd degree mason.
Wow.
And most people know there's some sort of a tie. And prophets have even, I think Heber C. Kimball, I could be wrong on the prophet there, but he talked about that we have the true masonry, because masonry and Christianity don't really go hand in hand. But see, and I mean, Kabbalion, that's Jewish, right? And the Kabbalion or Hermetic principles from Hermes Trismegistus is more pagan. There's a lot of magic, there's a lot of alchemy and mysticism tied into it. But the thing is that Joseph Smith wasn't opposed to all of that, and in fact would talk about that all the time. He was very much into the magical way of thinking. He even used a seer stone to translate the Book of Mormon. He didn't even look at the Book of Mormon to translate the Book of Mormon. He looked at a magic stone in a hat, and he was also known as being a treasure digger. So they would use these divining rods.
Hat works too.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, the gold plates were. Yeah, it was a nice gesture, but we just needed the stuff. No, and they would use divining rods to find treasure, and Joseph Smith apparently was really popular for doing that. Mostly failed attempts, but that's a different story. But yeah, and to know that Joseph Smith was a Freemason and a Master Mason, and was mixing with the likes of Alexander Nabar and learning about the Hermetic principles and the Kabbalah and alchemy and all that kind of stuff, it completely like flips your perspective on the church and has made it so much more interesting to me.
Right. And
I've been able to look at it in a completely different perspective, and actually, I know it sounds crazy, but kind of respect it in a way, because there are some really, really deep principles that that are universal truths that do exist within the religion. Unfortunately, it was lost, in my opinion, after Joseph Smith, and has been completely forgotten and kind of hidden and not talked about, unfortunately.
After Brigham Young took over, or?
Yeah. Well, I mean, there was a lot of splinter groups at that point, and since then, right? But Brigham Young was the largest that brought everyone, the pioneers from Illinois to Salt Lake City, Utah. So anyway, that was a lot, but I had to get that all out there because wow, that just blew my mind, that what you just showed me. Like they have so much in common. I've got to read that.
Scary. It's really scary. I do definitely agree with. It's kind of weird how I can look at these men and kind of have a respect for, number one, their work ethic. Like they worked hard on these cults, and then there are universal truths and patterns that they set up a community. That's a lot of work. Like you're living that life 24/7, 365. That's a lot of work. So I can respect them for that. But everything you're saying is also pretty interesting, because Charles Taze Russell, even though it's not really blatantly stated or admitted, looking at the literature, the early magazines that they were giving out door to door, there's Freemasonry symbols on there. There's Knights Templar crosses and bows on there. There's this book from 1886 with the pyramidology on there. And Charles Taze Russell, when he died, I believe it's in Pittsburgh, his tomb, his memorial, his tombstone is a pyramid with an all-seeing eye on it and a Knights Templar cross on it.
That is insane. I don't know.
That kind of says everything.
There's a book in the Pearl of Great Price, which is part of like our Mormon scripture. And what it is basically it's a bunch of translated Egyptian scrolls. And so there's an Egyptian tie there too, between Jehovah's Witness and Mormonism.
It's almost like these guys were like competitive cousins or something. Like, even though I think definitely Mormonism started before JWs, they kind of sided. We'll see who gets
Yeah.
bigger.
Well, Joseph Smith had a competitor. I can't remember his name now, but I wish I had that on the top of my head. But they both had about the same amount of followers in the early 1830s. And they all kind of had a similar, you know, kind of mindset. But Joseph Smith's first vision just did it. And Mormonism kind of took off and then left the other ones in the dust. But it feels like there were several people that were, you know, in the early 19th century that were just all like ready to start these, you know, these new modern religions. And I think what made it really exciting is the whole Gnostic aspect of it. In whole, meaning, you know, introducing ideas from Egypt, like, you know, the pyramids and the patterns and the Kabbalah from the Jews, and just going back to some of these ancient teachings and then wrapping them up with Christianity, I think was brilliant. And then Joseph Smith took it a step further because he was also super fascinated by the American Native Indians and would study them like crazy, just as much as he would study the Bible. In fact, there are a lot of stories of people that would say Joseph Smith would do like theatrical performances of like Indian tales and like act them out and stuff. And so,
wow.
And so it's like this.
That's great.
Yeah,
that's
it's
great.
like this collage of ideas that these men tried to stitch together, and some in better ways than others. And the better they stitch the tales together and were able to tell a cohesive philosophy and story, the longer they're lasting, I think. I mean, you know, and so in that regard, I'm just saying the brilliance of these men, you know, in that regard is, I think, respectable, but also they were super cunning to get going. I mean, geez, they had to really drink their own Kool-Aid.
Yeah. There's that, and I think it takes a certain type of person to do that. Like, you've got to, obviously confidence is there, but there's a certain type of narcissism that goes with, hey, I'm stitching together all these stories and philosophies to get these people to believe the way I want them to believe and do the things that I want them to do. That takes a certain type of person.
Yeah, well, and it worked. Well, and it worked for them because back in the day, there was no, I mean, you know, we were talking about the age of information, you know, now with the internet, social media and everything. It's like, see, those teachings really were esoteric or occult, so to speak, because there was no, I mean, the groups were so small that actually knew the internal meanings behind things, and they kept it like that. You know, there were like these brotherhoods, like you see in Masonry and stuff, where it's like they kept all of that knowledge kind of to themselves, almost in a way to be able to control the people with the exoteric nature of the whole thing, because they understood it and they were able to completely use it to their favor and control an entire, you know, group of people that way, for the good or the bad. But in their minds, I honestly think that they had justified it to themselves, based on experiences that they had, that it was good. You know, I think it's interesting because you hear about this, like people having mystical experiences, and I'm talking outside of psychedelic drugs, because we know that happens. But no, but like people are, you know, just going about their day, just, you know, maybe they're in a really like aligned place with, you could say, with, you know, with themselves, with nature, with, you know, with the universe, whatever. But something happens where they, and a term used to describe this is the Kundalini. Have you heard of the Kundalini before? Like the rising of the Kundalini?
No, I'll be honest. No.
Okay, so it's that word is it's more from like, you know, the like Eastern philosophy, but basically, you know, I'm sure you've seen a lot of art with Buddha, or, you know, in Buddhism, they use a lot of serpents kind of raising over the head. So what happens is there's apparently this mystical experience where literally it's, you know, when people describe it, it sounds like a psychedelic experience. It sounds like somebody just took a tab of LSD or something, but they were completely sober. Something chemical happens in their brain where they have this feeling, this perception that they are one with everything, and it's and dualism disappears. And anyway, so that happens to people, and I know people that's actually happened to, and it's really unexplainable. It's this, you know, mystical, mysterious happening, really. And I think that, you know, that experience is where religion kind of stems from in a way. But the problem is a lot of people see it like the experience was unique to them. And so they are called, you know, from God or whatever. They, you know, they're special in the matter. Instead of teaching like Jesus taught, I mean, we don't really know who Jesus was, but the Jesus that we know taught, you know, that the kingdom of God is inside of all of us, you know, and that everyone can have the experience. I think that's kind of what makes, you know, and Buddha, for example, as well, right? Teaching others that, you know, that, I mean, don't try to become the Buddha. You know, I'm not the answer. The answer is within you, kind of thing. But so I don't know, man. I think he did have a mystical experience, and I don't know if that was with some aid of some sort, like a peyote or a mushroom or something, or if it was one of these mystical sober experiences, and he literally bought into his own, you know, like he bought his story to be unique and special to just him, you know. I mean, who knows, right? But I mean, that's my kind of take on it, you know. So Charles, you said was his name, right?
Yes.
So
Charles Taze Russell.
Okay, so Charles Taze Russell, did he have a mystical experience himself then? What was it that really helped the JW Church kind of take off in that same regard?
He definitely, I mean, there's nothing on the research that I've done, maybe people can comment below, but there's nothing that in the research that I've done that it says he's had mystical experiences. Of course, you know, growing up Jehovah's Witness, we do believe that God can speak to us or move us or make us feel something. I've had conversations with other ex-JWs where they're like, well, you know, sometimes different cults put things in the water when you're baptized and you feel something. But I've had friends who felt something. I know I felt something when I was baptized that I can't. It was something. It felt like a weight was lifted off my shoulders. It felt like something left my body. So I totally get how people are saying, you know, I can't. Maybe the scriptures don't make sense, but I know how I felt and something moved me. I understand that mindset because I felt something. But then I asked some of my friends that I was baptized with, like, oh, I didn't feel anything. I don't feel any different. I'm like, and they're still JWs to this day. I'm not. So I believe that certain cults will go to the length of, really tampering with some stuff. And others will, you know, those mystical experiences. Charles Taze Russell, he obviously believed in. And back then, like you said earlier, it wasn't uncommon. It wasn't pagan. It wasn't bad to believe that way because that was common for many faiths to believe that way.
Yeah. The whole magic mindset was normal.
No internet. You just had books. College wasn't really affordable for a lot of people. And this guy who, you know, owned a bunch of retail chains, shut down his religion and took his, you know, probably millions of dollars in today's money and started this faith. And he honestly thought, I believe, that he was doing the right thing by stitching together these beliefs because he was analyzing the scriptures and trying to really see what the Bible says. But he could only do that based off his experiences and what he was exposed to. So giving him the benefit of the doubt, I think he full-heartedly probably did believe. I know that the governing body, the 8 dudes that control the Jehovah's Witnesses, based off of how they're talking, even though they're pulling stuff out of the air and making stuff up, I think and I believe they believe what they're talking about.
Of course they do.
Yeah. It's not just some kind of facade. They have to at that level.
Yeah, and then the whole idea of kind of, you know, oh man, we've been talking a while. I don't know. Maybe we should wrap this up. I was about to get into free agency, but
I know
we're going to different conversation.
Episode 2.
Yeah. I mean, maybe we should have a whole conversation just about free agency.
We should. Like, I think we should have
that would spawn some interesting conversations. Because what you just said leads to that question as well. I mean, so knowing that if they actually believe it and all their decisions are hedged up against that belief, how, you know, what is freedom, right? Like how, how do you define freedom, you know, from a psychological perspective, philosophical. Well, dude, okay, let's do a part 2. We dove into a lot. We didn't even get into some of the things I wanted to say, but I mean, I think people, if you're interested, Harold Bloom wrote a really good book on, it's called, let's see, America's, hold on, I'll find it here in just a second.
Yeah, I'll link everything in the description below.
Yeah, it's called The American Religion. Sorry, The American Religion, Harold Bloom. Okay. But he talks about this whole kind of, you know, hype during the early 19th century, and you know, and this whole just new kind of like renaissance of religion that happened in America. It's super interesting to see. So that's a good one. And I want to get that book. I got to read that book. You got to share that one too.
Yeah, these are hard to find. You can find them on. I'll see if I can get you a link or something. But or even like
it's amazing that you have the actual like book. I love like what's actually holding up this my laptop right now is a bunch of books. I just love actual physical books. So I love seeing that, man.
I'm not the only one. Yeah, I have a wall full of books that are on philosophy and breaking down cult mindsets and all this crazy stuff that's in these books.
Man, you know, and there's symbols within the temple that are just completely left up to the members to just like try to somehow understand it or piece it together, but without giving them the key. Like they don't know. I didn't know about Hermes Trismegistus, Hermeticism, the Kabbalion, the Kabbalah, and the Zohar, and I really didn't even know what Freemasonry taught or anything like that. But yet I was expected to somehow piece together the puzzle of the temple. But now that I've studied all of that, it's easy to piece it all together. You know what I mean? And it's like, oh wow, okay. I'm starting to see it now, but it's so deep, you know. And one other thing we didn't get to though is the plurality of gods. I really wanted to talk about that. So maybe we'll have to
make it happen. Yeah,
we'll have to talk about that because I don't think that Jehovah's Witnesses. You guys believe in one supreme Father?
Yeah, they had like Jehovah is God, Jesus is the Son. They don't believe in the Trinity. And then the governing body is the physical representation of all of their commands to humanity.
Okay. So they don't believe that you can become God?
No, but they did believe a long time ago, very similar to Mormonism, that you could get your own planet. But that belief was changed in the early 1900s, I think, when Rutherford came along. So their version of the second leader taking over.
Oh, that's too bad. You got a whole planet taken away from you.
Yeah,
I think more people would be pissed on that.
Tons of concubines.
Okay, well we'll do that another time. We'll talk about the Godheads. We'll just have one on God.
That would be fascinating. Just a lot of people, when they get out, they're like, "What do I believe in now?"
We could talk. We could do it kind of in 2 parts, right? Like, okay, what are the gods with? What is God according to Jehovah's Witness? What is God according to the LDS faith? And then let's just talk about God, just you and I.
Yeah, let's do it.
All right, that sounds fun.
Cool. And where should I send them to find you? I know you have your YouTube channel up and going. Very excited about that.
Yeah. I would just go to YouTube and search Trevor Haugen, and from there I stem everything from there. Yeah, so that's kind of the portal.
Awesome. Okay, I'll make sure I'll put some links in the description so people can find you, because you've got some really great things to talk about. So Trevor, thanks again for spending some time. We'll definitely do a part 2 and maybe a part 3. This is fascinating stuff.
Like well, thanks, man. Appreciate it. Thanks for having me.
Awesome. Okay, we'll talk soon.
We'll talk soon, man. Later.